Thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. You sent me a copy of all of the breakout sessions for this conference, and it really looks like it's an amazing event. And I know you're in the middle of it right now, and I'm privileged to be part of it. As Cindy mentioned, I am going to pause at one point and see if there have been any questions. So feel free to use the text box to talk to one another, to share ideas or reactions, or any questions you would like to share. I will try to get to them, and I'll try to save a little bit of time at the end. I would like to say, though, that my email address is accessible through Libraries Thrive Consulting. And if you have questions you either didn't ask or you asked and we didn't get to them, please feel free to email me at any time. I'm always happy to talk after these events and get to know the attendees better and make sure everything that you wanted to know, and we do our best to answer. Okay, so here we are in Plan to Lead. I'd like to get started by spending a minute or two just reminding ourselves how impactful great leaders are, just so we know that everything I'm going to talk about is really worth it. So I want you to picture in your mind the greatest leader you've ever known. With any luck at all, it's somebody you're working with right now, or maybe working for. For me, it was one of my managers early on in my career. When I wrote my first book, Be a Great Boss, I titled it Thinking of Her. She was absolutely amazing. She believed in me. She motivated me. She trained me. She supported me. She encouraged me to grow. She even encouraged me to leave that branch and go on to a promotion because she knew it was something that I wanted. Now, you'll notice I didn't say anything about how well she ran the branch, like budgets and time cards and all that. She did all that well, too. But to me, that's not what makes a really great leader. As I said, while you're thinking about this, if you'd like, you don't have to name names, but type into the chat box, what were some of the characteristics of the person you thought of when I asked you to picture this greatest leader in your mind? What were some of the things about that person that had the biggest impact on you? These are things that are great to remember as we go on and try to become great leaders ourselves. There's nothing more supportive than mirroring somebody that we've already known who's done a great job of it. Did you ever wonder how these great leaders got to be so great? In the case of the lady that I'm mentioning, if I'm not mistaken, she started as a part-time young adult staff member when her children were little. She did a lot of programming, collections, all the normal reference work, that kind of stuff. I'm guessing that she probably turned just about every problem she ran into over to her boss, probably what she was required to do. And I'm thinking she also probably made her share of mistakes. Being a leader isn't easy. This quote, I think, says it all. We have to succeed on purpose. And part of succeeding on purpose is making sure that we're constantly growing and learning new things. Like you and me, we have to figure out how to lead. You're here at this breakout session because you know that developing into a great leader takes intention, it takes effort and resiliency. I think the most important thing to remember, though, as we go forward in thinking about becoming a great leader is to continually believe in ourselves and to believe in our own success. There can be lots of things that can get in our way, but as long as we have that commitment to ourselves and that belief in our own abilities, we're going to be able to overcome any of them. You've probably seen and heard examples like this one. For example, Walt Disney was once fired from his job at a newspaper because it was assumed that he had a lack of imagination. Stephen King resubmitted his book Carrie 30 times. And if any of you have ever submitted a written manuscript and been rejected, you know it's not a great feeling, but 30 times he continued to believe in himself. Oprah Winfrey was referred to as being unfit for television. And Colonel Sanders did not start his chicken empire until he was 62 years old. I don't know about you, but I've been working on becoming a great leader or a better leader for 35 years, and I'm not ready to give up. So let's get started and talk about some pathways that we can follow in order to make this happen. Another first of all that we need to clarify is that leader isn't a title, it's an ability. I know a lot of times we hear lead from any position, and sometimes that comes along with an eye roll and people say, yeah, right, but you don't have any authority, or they just don't believe in the validity of that concept, but it's absolutely true. People who have those leadership affinities and abilities, they know it, and they know it from an early age. You can see it in people that you supervise, and you've seen it obviously in yourself. This is my grandson, Carter. This guy is a leader, a born leader. I don't know what he's going to be when he grows up, but whatever it is, he's going to be in charge of it. I use this slide and this picture of him because I love the story of when he was this age. He missed several days in a row at daycare because of a cold. And when he went back, the teacher told my daughter, I'm so glad he's better and he's back. These kids didn't know what to do. They just sat around. They couldn't figure out what to play or where to go because of the natural leadership and joy that this kid shares, and that all the leaders we want to follow will demonstrate. It's in everybody, no matter what position you're in, to be able to see that you have these gifts. I'm wondering when you first realized that you either were a leader or you wanted to become a leader. That's another fun thing to go ahead and type into the chat box if you'd like, just to see the wild variety of ages when it sort of dawned on you that leadership was something that not only did you like, but you wanted to be good at it. For me, it was the junior prom. I ended up chairing the junior prom. I don't know why, but from then on, it seems like anything I've ever been involved in, I've been at least in charge or partially in charge of it. And you know what? I really started to like it. But the abilities that we need to become a good leader aren't magic, right? One thing that we've all learned probably the hard way is that getting better takes a lot of work. My early leadership positions are full of examples of how much work I still needed to do. I didn't start out being committed to learning great leadership skills because when I was younger, I figured I knew it already. As a matter of fact, I guess I figured I knew everything. Let me give you a couple examples of how well that went. This is not a picture of my library, but it kind of speaks to the theme of my comments here. In one supervisory position I had, I decided it would be brilliant if I just moved everybody around and changed the branches everyone worked at, and they'd be able to grow their skills and get to know more patrons, and the schedule would be easier to make. And you can imagine how well that went over. I also worked at a library once where it was time to move to a new city for many, many different reasons. So I jumped right into that with my usual fervor, made some decisions, picked out some places, shared a little bit of information, not a lot. You can imagine how that went over. And my personal favorite was the introduction of roving reference, which for those of you who work in libraries, which I'm sure you all do, you know that's not exactly about as popular as open-toed shoes and dress code debates, right? None of these things went as smoothly as I had expected them to go. I had a lot to learn. I'm not going to ask you to share all of your mistakes in the chat box, but I bet you're thinking about a few of them and a few of the times when you were in a leadership role and you did something well-intentioned that you realized afterwards, you know what? I got a lot to learn in this area, and that's okay. I love this quote from Abraham Lincoln, is that failure, there's nothing wrong with failure as long as we never, ever become content about it. I wasn't, and I bet you aren't either, or you wouldn't be here this morning or this afternoon. I've had a lot of people often say, you know what, it's too late for me. I can't learn anything new, or I don't need to know it yet. I'm not in that position yet. And I disagree. It's my feeling and my belief that our libraries all over the United States, we need great leaders. We need them all the time, and we need them in every single position. So even if you're brand new, even if you just got a job and you're just promoted into a supervisory leadership position, you can start planning today to build those skills. Don't make the same mistake that I made and kind of pretend you know it all. I think I did that because I was ashamed to admit that I didn't, and I felt as though people would lack confidence in me if they knew how little I knew. But what I've come to realize, and I imagine you have too, is that by admitting that we need to learn more and we don't know everything, we build confidence both in ourselves and in other people in us. Even if you've been at it for a while, you're starting to dream about that retirement beach. You've been doing this maybe for 10 years, maybe 20, maybe 30. I mean, libraries are a pretty strange industry where people stick around for 30, 40, even more years. It's still never too late to really admit that it would be exciting to start to build some leadership skills that would make a difference. Nobody wants to work around that person, the one who retires and then 3 years later they leave. And in the meantime, they're just kind of taking up space. So no matter where you are, especially if you're near any one of those plateaus or burnout areas, addressing and really committing to learning some new skills and growing some abilities can make all the difference in making your days more interesting and more rewarding. And certainly don't wait until you get that first job. If you know that this is where you want to go and management or leadership is in your future, the sooner you start to build the skills and demonstrate the skills, the more likely you're going to be to get that job in the first place. Okay, so before we get into a process that I want to share with you, we should get a few things cleared up and a few things out of the way. These are kind of common misconceptions about leadership that it's helpful to discuss and as I said, move out of our way so that we can move forward with what really matters. Commonly, you hear, oh, you got promoted, you made it, you're at the top, this is great. And it always reminds me of a great story that I read about a woman named Frances Hasselbein. Frances Hasselbein is the former CEO of the Girl Scouts of America. She's also got all kinds of leadership experience and business acumen. But she was having lunch with a reporter one day at a table like this that was full of different kinds of silverware and glasses and whatnot. And the reporter said to her, now that you're the CEO of the Girl Scouts, how does it feel to be on top of such an enormous organization? And Ms. Hasselbein immediately began rearranging all the silverware and glassware and plates on the table. She was moving everything into circles, concentric, so a smaller circle inside a smaller circle inside a smaller circle. And in the very middle, she put something and said to the reporter, this is me. I'm not on top of anything. I'm in the center of a wonderful organization full of amazingly talented people. And when leaders begin to think of themselves as on top of organizations like that, they're in trouble. But as long as they realize that they're in the center and they've got all of this talent and support and energy around them, that's the beginning of true leadership. The second concept that I always like to address early on is you're going to have a ton of work to do, right? You're going to get buried in all the reports and the meetings and the budgets and the paperwork. And that's a real danger. Because when I do this particular training in an all-day workshop, one of the first things we talk about for quite a while is what is the job of a leader? And in this essence, I'm talking about a manager or a director or a supervisor in a leadership position. As far as I'm concerned, and I imagine you would agree with this, your job, your number one job, is to do what's listed here, to motivate people, to encourage them, to build your teams, to support everybody's work, to help people get over their mistakes, to congratulate and celebrate and appreciate them, to help them achieve new things and set stretching goals, to be collaborative, to be innovative, and to care about the people for whom you are responsible. There's going to be work, but real leaders find ways to make the work secondary to what they do with the people and how they support the people in their organization. So I always caution people to make sure they keep at the forefront of their mind that the real job of a great leader is to take care of the people surrounding them. And finally, this isn't as common of a conception because most people realize you're going to make a few mistakes, but a lot of times leaders seem to think that they're going to be doing everything right. And even if they don't do it exactly right, it's just not going to look like a real mistake or have any impact that a mistake can be. Another great quote: only those who are asleep make no mistakes. We have to be prepared to admit that we're wrong, to talk about how to fix mistakes, and in so doing, to encourage those people who report to us to understand that it's okay. Again, I said this before, and it's worth reiterating. Our honesty about admitting our weaknesses and talking about our planned growth and correction not only helps us build confidence in ourselves, but it helps others grow their confidence in us as well. Okay, so here's the process that I mentioned that I'd like to talk about in most of this webinar right now. This is not a perfect process. It doesn't fit every situation, but it has worked for a lot of people and for me as a good outline to remember when you're facing a leadership challenge that you'd like to overcome. When you have a plan on how to approach a challenge, you're going to be much more likely to be successful in leading your way through it. So let's break this down one section at a time. First of all, we need to prioritize where we need to build our leadership skills. You know, we're coming up with a plan to develop leadership skills to grow as leaders. Where do we start? Well, the best place to start is with the biggest challenge that you're facing right now. This could be for your library or for yourself. I'm going to talk about that a little bit too, about your own career. But let's say you're trying to decide, I know I need to be better at this job because my library right now is facing something and I need to improve my ability to help people deal with it. Maybe it's something that affects the customers. That's probably an easy number one guess, right? If it affects your customers. Maybe it's something that's going to affect the library reputation in a certain way. Maybe it has to do with material challenges, and you know that in your position, you're going to have to be the voice of the library and answer all of these challenges and these angry patrons. And man, you just don't feel comfortable yet in those communication situations. You just prioritized a leadership skill you need to focus on. What if it's team morale? You know, with COVID going on right now, there is absolutely no shortage of examples of challenges that leaders are helping their teams to get through. And one of them certainly is this reopening process that we're all facing. Are we comfortable reopening? Is it safe to reopen? What about masks? What about distancing? What about cleaning? If you are in a leadership position and people are depending on you to lead them through these challenging changes, you're going to have to make sure that the skills you need to do so are in place. That might be something you're going to prioritize. Or, as I said, maybe it's something that's affecting your own career. Maybe you realize that the next thing you want to do is you want to move into a certain kind of a job, but there's just some skills that are missing. And that's what you're going to prioritize. I use this calendar for a purpose as an image for this part of my plan discussion. And that is because I recommend that people stop every single year and pick a focus for their primary professional development. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to learn other things along the way. You're not going to have spontaneous responses to things that pop up. But to start your year by focusing on a certain area that has a major impact on your library or your career is going to really help you when you get busy, when all of the other demands of your job pile up, to stay focused on where you need to grow and not let that fall along the wayside. You know, the Chinese name their years. This is the year of the ox. When I teach a workshop on strategic careers, and I talk about how it's important to reevaluate every year where you want to put your focus, I talk about finding out what year it's going to be for you. For example, As I said, maybe you have to do an awful lot of public speaking this year. Maybe you've got a levy coming up or something else that's going to be requiring you to go out to groups and do a lot of talking. Or maybe your supervisor has said they want you to do more presentations, more conference speaking, more workshops, and you are not comfortable doing that. Well, you just identified your primary leadership skill development target for this year as public speaking. Or what if you're taking over a large part of the budget, something that you haven't done before, the forecasting part or the taxations part or something else that's even more complicated? Or what if you're facing an opportunity to hire a lot of new people? With the past pandemic year that we've had, a lot of positions have been frozen, and God willing, things are going to improve and we're going to be building our staffs back up a little bit. Maybe you just don't feel all that strong in this area. Or maybe you're going to keep the team you have now, but you have to find a way to motivate them and to encourage them to get through the challenges that are really still in place. It shouldn't be too hard to decide what leadership area you need to develop when you take just a minute to sit there and sit back and think about what the biggest challenges your library is facing are. You're probably as tired of seeing the picture of the COVID bacteria, germ, or whatever as I am, but I couldn't pick anything else more challenging facing libraries right now than this. Maybe you're facing what's next in dealing with this COVID challenge, a leadership change, different projects that you're going to be taking on that are going to be different. As I said, more people coming onto your team that you have to develop. One of the really great processes of decision making that I learned from a Public Library Association initiative several years back called Turning the Page 2.0 was problem, solution, opportunity. And what that helps you to do is once you have identified a problem, then you list the solutions to that problem. And finally, you look at those solutions with an eye towards finding an opportunity for an impact that you can have. Now, this may sound like it's getting too complicated, figuring out where you want to grow as a leader. You might be wondering, why don't I just get better at everything as it happens? And as I said, some things will spontaneously pop up and you're going to be dealing with them. But for the most part, as I said before, by picking a central focus for the year, you're going to find that as webinars come up, as you get opportunities to maybe go to a conference or to go to a regional meeting, or maybe just picking out which professional books you want to buy or read or which articles you want to buy, you're going to be able to focus and you're going to be able to truly see and sense and understand the impact of your growth, which would be different if you were just completely hit or miss, knee-jerk reaction to everything that's been happening. True leadership development is a focused, committed act, and the impact of it, the results of it on your team and on your library are going to be a lot more clear when you can see that you've really made progress in a certain area, in the right area, in the most important area for you right now. So that's the P in the plan. And the L is learn. Obviously, you have something to learn if you're planning on building your leadership skills, or you wouldn't have a challenge in the first place, right? If you knew everything you needed about it. It's important, I think, to remember that we all learn differently, and we have to figure out what the best way is for us individually to learn and to move forward. One of the things that I often refer to when I'm talking about learning style is a really amazing poem. I guess it's a poem called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters by Portia Nelson. It's called There's a Hole in My Sidewalk. And I'm going to read it to you. It's very brief, but I think it's very impactful and reminds us about what it sometimes takes for us to realize how important it is and how simple it can be to learn something new. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street and there is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall. It's a habit, but my eyes are open. I know where I am. I know it's my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. You've probably, if not been in a situation like that, you have seen other leaders in a situation where even though things aren't working, even though there's a pressing problem, maybe within the team, or maybe with the library's budget, or with services, or with the board, nothing seems to be getting better. And often that's because that intentionality is missing, that opportunity to just sit back and to decide that there's something different I have to do and there's something new I have to learn. So, what is it that you're going to be learning? You have to consider in that priority area that you've described what gaps exist in your leadership skills. Now, you probably know how to do much of something, but maybe not all of something. It's probably going to be very rare that you're going to run into an example where you don't have a clue. So you've got to really look critically at where the gaps are and where are your opportunities to grow. If you think back to some of the earlier examples I shared of my initial mistakes and leadership failures that I made, you can see that it wouldn't be hard for me to find out where those gaps were and what I should do to fill them. Before sending people roving around in roving reference, I really didn't know anything about comfort zones. I needed to learn a lot more about how the team felt about the workspace and about the patrons that they were serving. Same with that facility changing, moving to a different town. I just didn't grasp fully the connection that the staff had to the patrons. And I had a lot to learn about how that connection is made. Is it a good connection or a bad connection? And how can it be mediated in such a way that it became productive? And of course, when it came to the roving reference, I had a lot to learn about the fear of failure because that was primarily what we discovered later was motivating the negative pushback that we were getting from the staff. So it's not always difficult to figure out where your gaps are and what you have to learn. And once you've figured that out, then you've got to ask yourself, where do you go to learn it? Fortunately for us, there are opportunities everywhere for learning. Now, everybody can't spend 5 days in New Orleans or Washington or Los Angeles at a national library or some other conference, right? Our libraries can't afford to send us all. But just because that may be the case, and especially now because so many libraries are unfortunately cutting their training budgets, that doesn't mean that we can't individually continue to find ways to advance our own careers and to be more successful at our work by finding lots of training opportunities. These are just a few of them. You can see some of them are free, some of them are very inexpensive. The Demco ideas and inspiration, every time I tell people about this at a workshop, I'm always surprised at how people don't know that Demco Ideas and Inspirations webpage is full of completely free webinars on all kinds of topics. So there's never, ever any shortage of opportunities for us to learn how to get better as leaders. We just have to decide which of these we're going to take. And again, think back to that focus, that prioritizing that you did, and realize that with that specific topic area in mind, it's going to be a lot easier for you to navigate all of these many different options and figure out what the best ones are. And of course, what's the best teacher of all? I bet if we were in a room and I could ask you to raise your hand if you knew, you'd all raise your hand and say, it's a mentor. If you don't have a mentor and you're in a leadership position or you want to be, that should be the very first thing you do when this conference ends and you're back in your library. get a mentor. Maybe it's somebody you sit next to at a workshop or a meeting. Maybe it's somebody whose book you just finished and you really liked what they talked about and it really spoke to what you want to learn. Maybe it's somebody recommended to you from a friend. I was in a meeting just this morning with the iSchool at Kent State University, and we were talking about how there are very, very few people in our industry who would turn you away if you sent them an email and said, you know, I'm making some choices in my career and I've got some learning to do. I really like hearing, seeing, reading, whatever, what you've been doing. Would it be possible for us to have a half-hour phone call? You know, we tie ourselves up with mentoring by thinking that in order to have a mentor, we have to create some elaborate mentorship program and sign people up and get the right software and blah, blah, blah. It can be a very spontaneous thing. It can be a once and done, or it can be coffee every week for the rest of your life. But reach out and find somebody who can just answer your questions and point you in the right direction. It is the most valuable learning tool you will ever, ever have. Again, keep my email handy. And if you have questions or you'd like to talk to me further about whatever in leadership, let me know and I'd be happy to be a mentor. Once we have these opportunities, these resources available to us, we have to ask for help. We have to listen to advice. And especially when it's contrary to what we think or what we might have done on our own, we have to be willing to appreciate and accept the fact that we may be learning something new that's a little uncomfortable in the beginning, but we've found the right resources, classes, or people to ask. And so now it's our turn to listen. Okay, you've prioritized where you need to grow your leadership skills first. Now, next year you can pick something else. You've learned some new things. So what comes next? What comes next is action. Maybe you've heard this quiz or this question before, but once upon a time, there were 5 birds sitting on the wire. 3 of them decided to fly away. How many were left? Well, people will say the answer to that is 2, unless they're really listening, and they'll say 5 are left because 3 decided to fly away, but they didn't do it. We have to take the actions one step at a time, even if it's a little risky. We have to start making choices and take actions to impact our own growth. Nobody else is going to look after us for us. We have to act first. And it's often a good idea to start with what they call low-hanging fruit. What can you accomplish? What difference can you make? Depending on that priority that you identified early on, you could be looking at something that's a crisis that's right on your doorstep, or you could be looking at a leadership challenge that's a little bit down the road. Only you can decide that. So only you can judge how fast you need to get started and how fast your learning has to get up and running. But you know you've made decisions about areas where you want to start learning. And in some instances, you're even going to have to be doing this on your own time. I know when I first started in libraries, in the particular system I was in, only the highest level managers had training paid for. So I was continually taking vacation time and using my own evenings and weekends and money to get my own training done. It was all I could do, but it was a place to start. One step at a time, you're going to be collecting opportunities for learning. You're going to be getting training that's supplied to you as part of your job. You're going to be seeing examples of things you don't want to do and the type of leader you don't want to be. And that's a great learning tool as well. And it's going to be leading you towards taking action to become a better leader. The secret to getting ahead is getting started. So you've got your priorities, you know what you're going to need to learn, you know how you're going to get started, and now you're going to actually move forward. The last letter in the acronym is what's next. Once you've solved a challenge, there's undoubtedly another one nearby. You can always move your library's team, yourself, your career forward, you can always continue to take steps ahead as long as you don't give up on the process of skills. But at the same time, think tomorrow as well. Remember the opportunity for building your own strategic career plan, if you will. In addition to addressing leadership needs for your library, don't ever forget your own career because, as I said earlier, there's not anybody out there who's going to look after it other than you. So it's something that you have to keep on the forefront of your own mind. Every once in a while, I run into a director or a branch manager and I'll ask them, when's the last time you took a webinar or went to a workshop? And they'll say, oh, it's been years. You know, we don't have a whole lot of money. I like to make sure everybody else gets to go. And I don't know about you, but I find that kind of frightening. You know, I don't want to go to a doctor who hasn't read a medical journal in 20 years, right? I certainly don't want to have a leader who hasn't paid enough attention to not only growing new skills, but strengthening the ones they had, because they're quote unquote letting somebody else develop their skills. There's just no excuse. You don't have to have the money. You just have to have the time, you have to have the intention, and you have to have the will to make a difference. So don't forget to focus on your own professional goals again. And then what comes after that? You start all over. Now, sometimes this whole process of planning to lead can't be quite as linear as I'm laying it out here. Sometimes things happen really, really quickly. And I'll give you an example of that. I don't know if you were working or remember this, but on August 14th of 2003, you may not know this, but I was a new deputy director at a library system with 4 branches. So that was the day that the almost entire East Coast blacked out. I imagine if you were working, no matter where you were, you remember that. That's an example that I like to refer to because when it comes to planning to lead, sometimes you are going to be incredibly spontaneous. This process really isn't as onerous or as tedious as it sounds when you write it down on paper. For example, the first thing I did was, as people were, I can remember standing on the stairs between the first and second floor of this big library. All of a sudden, everybody gathered around me. It was a scary time. It wasn't that long after 9/11. And quite frankly, as everybody started to hear and learn that the blackout was more than just our building, our city, our state, it was everywhere, people were getting scared. So as I was standing on that staircase, everybody started gathering around and looking at me and wanting me to help them, to comfort them, to make sure that they weren't afraid. So I went through this acronym of planning to lead by thinking first of keeping people safe. How could I do that? I needed to learn some things quick. So I looked at the emergency list. I got the schedule, got the meeting room reservation list. I wanted to make sure I knew where all the people were and were going to be. And then I quickly acted. I delegated different communication assignments. I closed the building. I delegated getting people out of the building. I contacted the appropriate authorities. The next part was equally as important, and it came a day or two later when I and the other managers in the building set up an ongoing person in charge training, communication log, and incident form process. So it isn't always something that you start on January 1st and you work your way through over a 12-month period. Sometimes planning to lead is just going to get dropped right at your feet. But I can assure you that if you have the confidence of knowing I can plan to handle this, I can manage through this leadership challenge because I know how to do it, you're going to be a lot more confident and secure. And when the leader is confident, the staff is confident. You know, like it's like that t-shirt, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Okay, the future's right around the corner. And as leaders, we need to know what's there too. So how are we supposed to know that? Well, we're going to look everywhere. Don't limit yourself to thinking about only library journals when you're thinking about what might be coming down the road, what you might need to be focusing on, what skills you might need to be developing. Think all outside the box. And if this isn't something that you want to do, or you have the time to do, or you're really that interested in, create a research and development committee or task force within your staff. An R&D task force is a lot of fun. You can rotate members off and on, give them the chance to do this kind of reading, to bring reports to you or even to higher ups about things that might be happening, might be coming down the pike that the library needs to be aware of. You know, things like thumbprint passwords instead of typing in a password. That's all the rage now, and it's going to be something that's going to be affecting libraries. All kinds of different technology changes and opportunities for new technologies. When leaders are confident enough to know that they can learn new things, then they got to get out there and they got to look for those things. Okay, I've got a few minutes before I'm going to go over some top 10 tips for you, but I do want to stop for just a second and see if anybody's had any comments or questions that I can answer before I move forward.
Hi, yeah, I've been checking. I just have a couple of comments. One person said, yes, I had a mentor my first year as a branch manager at the system I'm in now. I still reach out to him when I have a question. And this person also had a mentor through the State Library Association. Another person said about the poem, it's followed the person throughout their life and shared by a different person each time. And then, so no questions so far. So
Okay.
thanks.
You know, that reminds me of two things I always say about mentors. One of them is if you haven't done this before and you can really think of a mentor who really changed your whole professional career, take a minute to write a note to that person and tell them and thank them. And I suggest that because when I did that with the woman I've been talking to you about, she was so incredibly touched by it. And it took such a small amount of effort from me that it's something that I always remind people now to do. And I guess the most important thing too about thinking about that valuable, wonderful, impactful mentor you had is make sure you're mentoring somebody. Don't necessarily wait for somebody to come looking for you to say, I want to get into leadership and I love the kind of leader you are. But you go look and find somebody, or maybe more than one somebody's, and reach out and mentor them. Okay, I want to give you, I want to close the webinar by giving you some tips, things to keep in mind when it comes to developing your skills and becoming a better mentor. First of all, make sure you give yourself time. If you haven't taken a time management workshop or webinar or read a book on time management, you need to do that and maybe do it more than once. I personally probably have taken 6 or 7 over my career, and every single time I take one, I learn another really valuable tool that helps me to quit wasting time and to start spending my time doing more important things. So make sure, remember back to the earlier slide where you're going to have a lot of work, but your real job is people. Well, when you put those two elements together, you got a lot of stuff to do. So you've got to make sure you're using your time wisely. Also, remember as a leader that you're going to be getting a lot of requests. A lot of times when people have ideas, they take it to the boss, right? What do you think we should do? Let's try this, let's try that. Hopefully your library has a strategic plan. If not, you can create even an informal strategic plan. Even if you're doing it for just a department within a library or just one branch within a system, just something that can fine tune and focus your vision, both for you and for your team, so that you can make the best use of everybody's time and talents. Sometimes that means saying no. Doesn't mean you're never going to do something. It means you're going to maybe put it in the parking lot, so to speak, and get back to it at a later time. But you're going to have to learn to say no. Also, the more accomplished you become, the more successful you become, the more people are going to want a piece of you. They're going to want you on their committees. They're going to want you on the task force. And will you chair the conference? And I'm sure many of you are nodding your heads right now because you ask the people who do the most to do more. And that's just the way things go. But you have to take care of yourself. You have to establish and maintain a healthy work-life balance in order to be a strong leader. So practice saying no. Again, this is a little bit of a repeat of what I said earlier, but make sure that just because you can't do everything, you do what you can. That's the low-hanging fruit approach. Sometimes looking at a major challenge or a multifaceted challenge can make you feel almost hopeless and helpless, thinking, how can I ever make a difference here? But don't let perfect get in the way of good, and don't let the fact that you can't do everything stop you from doing anything. Remember also, look for tools to help you in your drive to be a better manager. Articles in magazines, blog posts, any kind of training that you can find. And again, people, mentors, coaches, colleagues. And once you figure out a way to accomplish or get around or to resolve a major challenge, consider creating a tool based on your experience that you can share with other leaders. I'm always telling people when they amaze me with what they're doing in the library, write that into an article. See if you can get that published. You should think about writing a book. So we can't rely on this wonderful pool of resources out there if we don't all contribute to it in some way. Make sure that you're taking the time to consider all your options. Sometimes, especially if the world seems to be in a kind of a panic mode, it can seem easy to jump at the first idea that somebody has or that you come up with. But make sure that you're breathing, you're taking your time, you're sitting back, maybe you're sleeping on it to think about all the different options that you have, and maybe even get a couple other people to help you to weigh in, to evaluate them and make sure you're doing the right thing. Again, you may not be doing the right thing. You may be making a mistake, and that's okay too. One of my favorite quotes from, I think it was from Ideas Are Free, was fail fast. In other words, don't be afraid to fail, just fail fast and then fix it and choose another option. Make sure that you know that you're going to have some challenges. I had a boss who used to say, when you're making a decision and you're thinking things are going to go smoothly, always prepare for the worst by asking yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen if I do this? That way, you'll have a little bit of preparation in place in case it does happen. And if it doesn't happen, you can celebrate the fact that it didn't happen. But whenever you're laying out a potential solution to something and thinking about a leadership challenge you're going to work through, give yourself the opportunity to think, okay, but what's the pushback going to be? What's the negative here? What do I have to address ahead of time to help allay some people's fears? What could go wrong? And be prepared for that. This is one of my absolute favorite pictures, and I use it a lot when I teach about growing confidence. I wrote a book called Win 'em Over because there are so many people who come to me for help in developing leadership skills now because they've been promoted very quickly. I've been in libraries over 35 years. I moved up the ladder one rung at a time. And although at the time it seemed kind of tedious, when I look back on it, I was always very grateful because I had the opportunity to build and grow so many experiences and to learn from so many people. But nowadays, with the baby boomer retirement, with the changes from the pandemic, with changes from funding for libraries, a lot of leaders are finding themselves thrust into a leadership position really quickly. Maybe they're over people they used to work with. Maybe they're way younger than people that they now supervise. Maybe nobody trusts them and thinks they can do the job. And maybe they don't trust themselves. Grow your confidence any way you can. There's lots of resources out there that can help you. If this is your priority for the beginning of your development of new leadership skills, if this is part of your plan, it's a very, very worthy goal. And as I've mentioned many times, when you make your mistakes that you will make sure you come right out, you talk about them. Whenever I would go and get a book, like Getting to Yes, because I wasn't very good at getting my group to consensus, or I can't remember another one now, but whenever I had a leadership challenge that I wanted to grow into, I would usually be carrying around a book I was reading about it. And I would make a point of carrying that book around almost on purpose because I wanted the staff to see that I was making an attempt to get better at my job and to correct my mistakes. So make sure that you're out in the open with them. One of my favorite workshops that I teach is called um, Don't Solve Problems, Grow Problem Solvers Instead. And the reason that's such a popular workshop is because so many leaders are familiar with the practice of people knocking on your door and saying, hey, here's a problem. I'm going to dump this on you to solve. Okay, have a nice day, right? That's what happens. If you want to grow problem solvers on your team, if you want to instill that skill in other people, you need to make sure that they know it's okay to make mistakes. It's all right. It's forgivable. It's repairable. And that's going to help you to encourage other people to make more decisions, to take more risks, to have more accountability, because you're going to be showing them that it's okay to take that risk. And most importantly, I would suggest you never give up. As I said earlier, I've been doing this for over 35 years, and I am constantly looking for ways to improve not only how I operate, but also how I teach leadership and management skills. There's always an opportunity to get better. We're lucky enough to always have another day to come back and try again. So don't ever give up on yourself. And most importantly, don't ever give up on those that you're motivating and training and supporting, and all of those terms that I used at the very beginning of this webinar. Nobody's going to do everything just the way you do it, but that doesn't mean that the way they're doing something is wrong. So keep your faith in them and in yourself, and don't ever give up on getting better. And finally, always plan to lead. Be intentional. You know, you're in a 3-day conference right now, and you're probably going to wind up at the end of it with a million great ideas in your head. My hope is that at least one of the things that you're going to take back with you is the reminder to sit down at home or at work for just a few minutes and think, all right, I want to be a better leader. I need a plan. So we do have some extra time here at the end. We've got about 7 minutes by my watch. So does anybody have anything they want to ask or talk about or share?
Yes, there are a few questions, so I'm going to get through them because we're running out of time. How do you admit a need for personal growth without eroding confidence of your staff when you are in a new organization or position?
I think you ask for their help. You know, if you're new to a job and there's some part of that job that you need to get better at, if it were me, I would sit down with the staff and say, you know what, I bring some strengths to this position. I'm kind of excited about sharing them with you, but I've got some areas where I need to grow too. And I'm going to need your help to get background, to hear what's happened in the past, to hear some of your input and ideas. And then I'm going to, you know, find some other resources and do some skill development. But that's what I would do. I would be very honest with them and ask them for help, and you know, just be very matter of fact about it. I mean, that's the kind of tone you want to set in a culture that purports to be a lifelong learning institution, right? It should be something that there should be no worry about losing face over.
Okay, thank you. Do you think the mentor has to be someone in the same profession, or can it be anyone in a leadership role in a different field?
Oh, I think it can be absolutely anyone. I mean, you know, depending on what your particular challenges that you're facing, you might want to get some industry, you know, wisdom to go with it. I don't know what, you know, if it's very specific, the issue, but if you're talking about leadership, oh no, I would ask anybody that you admire, anybody who's, you know, you can see that they're the kind of leader that you want to be.
Okay, thank you. How do you get experience in a department that is different than the one you are currently working in?
Well, I guess, again, that depends on the culture of the organization. I would hope that somebody would come to me if I was the leader, the boss, and they would say, you know, I work in children's, but I would really like to get some experience in tech services or in adult reference or in some other area or marketing or, you know, whatever. And I'm wondering if you can help me find some opportunities to do that. Um, Within your own institution, hopefully you have a boss who's going to recognize that kind of interest and that initiative and find some way to support it. Because let's face it, any area, anything we learn, any knowledge we add makes us a better employee overall anyway. But if you are in a situation where your institution is not going to be supportive of something like that, then find a way to do it on your own. You know, if you're interested in getting involved in marketing, for example, and there's no way you can do it at your library, see if you could do some volunteer marketing for a local nonprofit, you know, your community food bank or a school, you know, or a university or a church, anything.
Okay, thank you. How would you develop relationships and earn the respect of other leaders and colleagues when you are the youngest, one of the youngest managers in your system, even though you have multiple years of experience from another system?
Well, you know what? That's a nice long answer, and I would suggest first of all that if you can get an interloan copy of my book "Win 'Em Over," I talk about that's the whole workbook is about doing just that. But in a nutshell, basically, it is to start by recognizing and celebrating the past successes in the library department branch, whatever it is you're in, to really recognize and call out the contributions and what people who are there and have been there longer than you have made. And then to work together as a team to, as I said earlier, to build skills, to fill your skill gaps, and to share the skills that got you the job in the first place. You know, the most important thing about leadership of a team is the culture that the leader sets. And if that starts with very honest conversations about, you know, I realize that you've been here longer than I have. I'm excited to learn everything you've done. And I want you to learn all of the skills and strengths that I bring too, so we can work together. I mean, it goes back to that Francis Hasselbein story that I mentioned before, that the leader is in the center of a group. And if that kind of an honest conversation can kind of kick the whole thing off, then I think you're going to have a lot less trouble growing that confidence in other people.
Thank you very much. One last thing, someone would like to see the picture of the quote for number 9 again.
The quote from number 9. That one? Yep.
Yeah, never give up.